GOAT District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? We're back in the GOAT District on Halloween Eve, Dan. Halloween Eve. Neither of us rocking the costumes. I mean, you know, we're not. It's like 1 p.m. right now on the Thursday night football day of. But I know my daughter, my 9-year-old, is excited for Halloween tomorrow. But I'm excited for tonight. I'm excited for this weekend, Dan. We've got what, 3 6-2 teams right now, including our main and a couple big gorillas. Hopefully, you guys out there are crushing your league so far. Whether you are or you're not, we're gonna help you out today in this show. We're loaded with goodness, talking about everything you can think of: waivers, trades, scenarios, depth charts, running back situations, you name it. We're gonna hit on it today. And as usual, make sure you guys drop your questions in the live chat. What's up, Snowman? What's up, Nick Constantino? Appreciate you guys joining as always. And Dan, loaded show. We had Josh Larkey last week. Today, you and I are going to chop it up. A lot of goodness to talk about. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited about being able to get on, and I like this, the time where we're doing it on Thursday days. Much as we can. I think we'll do that going forward, because then we can really, we've got a little bit more info on the week, and so it's a little bit easier to, kind of figure out what's going to happen for the week. Love to see it, and love to see, we got Harry Snowman, we got Nick from Go Bills in here, so the chat is already going, so good to see.
Snowman, the golden hour in Portugal. I'll be there soon, Snowman. I'll be there soon. Application went in this week, and hopefully by the new year, I'll be joining you across the pond there. But yeah, lots to talk about. We when we have guests on, I try to let kind of you and the guests, go with the goodness with regards to talking topics, giving, some good answers to our questions. But today you and I get to chop it up. So I'm excited to drop some goodness. Remember, guys, smash that like button, help support the show. It's not a big ask, it takes a couple seconds, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to miss any of our goodness on a weekly basis, make sure you pinch that notification button so that you get a notice every time we go live. So Dan, let's jump into it, talking injury fallout and backfield shakeups. And that it's got to start in New York, Dan. The Giants thought they had something good, something new, something fresh for that offense with, of course, the rookie Dart and the rookie back in Skattebo. Unfortunately, a gruesome injury. He's out for, I want to say, rest of season. I saw something change from like out for rest of season to IR, something like that. But I think it'll be almost a miracle, I think, to see him come back. But who knows these days with the way medicine is. He's got a dislocated ankle, fibula fracture that happened in the loss to the Eagles. The question, what we want to talk about is kind of who steps up. Does this offense still produce fantasy relevant volume with who steps in? And are there any, kind of hidden stashes, spot start options that we can throw into our lineups from this backfield? I'll let you kick it off, buddy.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate injury for Skattebo. I think we had one of the the great buddy movie type stories going on this backfield. He and Dart really seem to feed off each other, and that's, I think this is going to hit the Giants a little bit harder, in the intangibles area almost than what Skattebo was actually bringing to the backfield. But he was bringing a lot to the backfield. So I don't think Tyrone Tracy is going to be able to duplicate what Skattebo was doing. I think it's going to be 70-80%. I think we're going to see a little bit more Singletary in there, probably on the goal line. That was not a strength for Tracy last year. And but what Tracy does bring is he brings elite speed. I mean, when he gets a chance and breaks into the open field, he can make some really, really long runs and pass receptions. So I'm excited to see that too. The only other thing I want to say on this is, if you're in a dynasty league and you're looking at Skattebo and you're going, okay, well, 2026, he'll be back, he'll be ready to go. I mean, I think he will be in a way back, and in a way he will be ready to go. But I think it's going to be a little bit more of a Tony Pollard type thing, where this is the exact sort of injury that's going to probably cost him another year of productivity. I don't think 2026 is going to really be Skattebo's year. So if you're sitting on him in Dynasty and you can sell him to, somebody who's rebuilding or something like that on the promise of, hey, you'll have a great player in 2026, I'd probably kick the tires on that, see what you can get for him, because, you might be able to acquire him for half the cost halfway through 2026 yourself. So just one word of warning there.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good warning, because rebuild teams are always kind of looking to buy those players that they can insert to their lineup week one the following season, try to make that team competitive. So there is a bit of a cautious warning there from Dan, and I think it's a legit one. Now, I think what this shows us is what we know at the position, right, Dan, is the running back position it unfortunately deals with injuries, and not always this gruesome, but it does happen pretty regularly, and that's why you want to make sure you've got most of the depth on your bench is tied to the running back position. And hopefully you kept Tyrone Tracy on your bench if you did have him and you're able to hold him. I don't know that he's going to be out there in too many waiver wires from what I saw, especially FFPC in the leagues that I'm in, whether it's redraft, dynasty. Didn't really see him out there, but I know I have him on quite a few benches. Now, you talked about Skattebo, how successful he's been. Top 5 the last 3 weeks in fantasy points per game by running backs, so it's definitely going to hurt. Skattebo was the RB11 on the season in fantasy points per game, top 5 in touchdowns and receiving yards. Now, last season, 2024, you talked about his speed. Tyrone Tracy did see 10 targets week 14, so he can be involved in the passing game. I don't know that it's going to be to the extent of Tracy, but we are seeing Dart, kind of check down to the running back with that rapport he's built with Skattebo. So hopefully that spills over. You said, 70, 80%. I think that's pretty good if we can get that or more from Tyrone Tracy, considering the situation. And let's remember this. Tyrone Tracy is coming into this situation where Jackson Dart has now, kind of warmed up to the NFL. He's getting more familiar with the NFL, getting more comfortable at the position at this elite level. So, maybe we can get closer to the 80+ range with Tyrone Tracy, and maybe these two can continue to build on what Skattebo and Dart have built so far. Looking at their schedule, strength of schedule moving forward, obviously they've got their bye coming up in a few weeks, but before that they have 3 pretty tight games when you're looking at defenses versus the running backs. So they play San Fran, then at Chicago, and then they go Green Bay, at Detroit, and at New England, who have been pretty tough against the run. So you kind of want to look at that as well. But I feel like in this situation, Tyrone Tracy gives you a good option as a flex. You don't necessarily want to, depend on him as your RB1 or anything, but, bye weeks, decent RB2, and then pretty good flex, I think, for anyone who has him on the roster. All right, let's go to another backfield, Dan. The New England Patriots, another offense that's been rolling. They're were, what are they now? 6-2, I believe. One of the top teams. Who would have thunk, right? Indy and New England, top teams in the AFC. That's why we love football. That's why the NFL keeps us on our toes, especially us fantasy players. Rhamondre Stevenson now dealing with the toe injury. They bring in rookie Terrell Jennings, who they signed to the active roster, and they also brought in Dearness Johnson to the practice squad. From what I saw, they've even got like a locker there for Johnson. They expect him to come in and fill in a role. What role that is, we don't know yet. I guess the question is, Dan, and I like asking you this question because, you were huge on Henderson coming in. I think a lot of fantasy land, including myself, we're excited to see Henderson come into this offense, but we haven't necessarily seen it yet. He's coming off of those 75 yards with 10 carries last season. He's had 3 red zone carries the last 3 games, so he's becoming more and more involved. Do you expect him to kind of slide into a bigger role as we move forward now? Do you expect Vrabel to continue his kind of quote unquote hate for Henderson and kind of keep the cap on him with regards to his usage and maybe use these other guys? Or does New England go out and get a running back before trade deadline? What are your thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, I don't know how significant this toe injury is for Rhamondre, but one thing we can tell for sure is that there is very little trust for TreVeyon Henderson on that coaching staff. I don't know why. I suspect it probably has to do with pass protection, but it's got to be more than that too, because they don't seem to want to use him very much, or when they do, it seems to be very reluctantly. And then now you get the situation with Rhamondre pretty clearly hurt to the point where they think, hey, we got to add in some reinforcements, and so they do add in Dearness Johnson, and basically it comes down to tell me you don't trust Stevenson without actually saying the words, because Stevenson, the last 5 minutes of that game, instead of you can spin it one way, you can say, well, they pulled their starters, and so TreVeyon Henderson was one of those starters, and so maybe that's good for him. And you can say, well, TreVeyon Henderson fumbled right before, they pulled him, so maybe that's bad for him. Or you could say, well, every time Rhamondre fumbles, it seems like his job security gets better, so maybe that's good for him. But with bringing in Dearness Johnson and the way that they've been talking, they haven't really been talking up, You would think if they were excited about TreVeyon, they'd be talking him up and they'd be saying, hey, we're excited to be able to unleash him or something like that. And it's like, yeah, we don't really want to talk about our running back rotation. It'll be whatever it is, and we're working through that right now. So I don't think that we can trust Henderson until we see the coaching staff trust him, and he's going to be firmly planted on my bench until I see a good game from him or some sort of indication from the coaching staff.
Yeah, and I mean, Johnson's kind of that between the tackles kind of guy, so maybe Henderson, stays in that role where he's, more the third down pass catching kind of guy, but he's definitely not going to be a workhorse, I don't think. And like you said, it's hard to put him in your lineup until, especially a lot of these rookies. I think, Dan, we get excited for them, and you're good at kind of tempering. I want to see it first. I want to see it from you before you get into my lineup. And I think that's a mistake a lot of fantasy players make, is getting that excitement, especially in a situation like this where they're going to throw in Henderson. You know what? I got a bye week situation I need to fill in. I'm going to put it in my RB1, my RB2. And you have to temper expectation. Now, the good news for New England is they're going up against Atlanta, who's given up the most points to the running back position in the last 3 games. But at the same time, New England is 26th in the league in fantasy points for running backs this season. So the offense still runs through Drake May. We're seeing him kind of spread the ball with those receivers. They still have, Hunter Henry there. So it'll be interesting to see how they move forward with these running backs, and if they make a splash on the before the trade deadline for that position. So we're going to go to Green Bay now, Dan. Another backfield, another offense that's been rolling. Jacob's snap share has been trending down, and Wilson is showing some juice. Like, I guess the question is your last weekend we saw them give Emanuel Wilson 14 touches in Green Bay in week 8 or in the Green Bay offense. So Jacobs owners, should they be worried about him maybe not getting the bulk of the volume like we're used to seeing? Is this just kind of simmer off of him dealing with that calf injury and maybe them wanting to make sure that he's healthy and only using him when they need to? How should fantasy players approach this Green Bay backfield?
Yeah, I think it's basically the calf injury is the main problem here. And then, specifically against Pittsburgh, you're looking at a pass funnel defense. So they just kind of leaned into that and, unleashed Love a good bit in that game. So I think it's the combination of they just didn't really need to run the ball that much. They, had a chance to take it easy on Josh Jacobs. They're trying to keep him fresh for the whole season. They don't want that calf injury to get any worse. So they're using Emanuel Wilson, who looks pretty darn good, as you noted. And basically what I'm getting out of this whole situation is it's basically RIP for the the Marshawn Lloyd shares in Dynasty, because, when he was asked about it, the head coach there is going, Marshawn Lloyd isn't anywhere close. We're not talking about that, and I don't think that he's really still that injured. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think he's just basically, they don't trust him anymore. He's sort of getting the Kendre Miller treatment, and it would probably take a new coaching staff to unlock him. So if there's any point at any time that you see any sort of sign of life from Marshawn Lloyd, if you have dynasty shares remaining, I would move off on that news and just try to get whatever little bump you can, because it doesn't look good for him. I think Josh Jacobs is just fine. I think Emanuel Wilson is cemented as a backup.
Yeah, and the problem for Lloyd is this is the second season it's like this, right? We saw Wilson last year come in and have some games. I know we had him kind of as a depth piece on some gorillas and those sorts of things. Marshawn Lloyd is on IR and, on some dynasty teams, that kind of thing, but you definitely can't depend on him. I think it's one of those where they're only going to give him so many chances to come in and prove himself. And if he can't stay healthy, they got to look elsewhere. So they've got Brooks there as the RB3. Wilson, I think, slides in as the clear RB2, and maybe they do lean a bit more on Wilson, between now and playoff time, because they want to save Jacobs as well going into the season. This team is definitely a contender. They added a big piece on defense, so you got to think that continues. And they have a pretty nice schedule for running backs coming up. They've got really the only kind of game that you would be a little cautious about is at Detroit in a few weeks, but otherwise pretty decent schedule. And the Packers have put up top 10 running back fantasy points per game this season so far. So let's go to our second segment, Dan, and let's look at kind of offenses to check in on and rest of season outlooks. And one of the big surprises last week, I know sometimes I catch some of these games later because Sundays are pretty busy here. So I'll turn on the red zone and, I'll catch up on the actual games, individual games through the night into the Monday. One that kind of surprised me was Miami. Big road win versus a strong defense. I talked about, the weakness at running back, but overall a pretty decent defense so far this year. Can we trust this Miami offense moving forward? They've been pretty sluggish, not pretty to this point, but coming off of a big win like that, do we think that they're turning things around? Which Dolphins offense do you think that we see moving forward, and which pieces do you want from this offense before we get into tonight's game specifically?
Yeah, I think Miami is going to be a little bit up and down on offense all year long because, basically they're dependent on the arm of Tua, which can, he can have great games and he can have terrible games. Against Atlanta, it was more of a failure of Atlanta to be able to move the ball at all, which gave Miami a lot of chances. I mean, Atlanta couldn't get a first down on like their first 5 drives. They couldn't even get one first down. And so what that does is it just keeps giving the ball back to Miami's offense over and over and over again. But basically the way you're going to play this offense is you're going to play it through either Achane or else you're going to play it through Waddle. Anybody else, you're just basically it's a wing and a prayer. You're just hoping. that you get something out of it. And when Waller comes back, I think he'll be a good addition as well. But until then, I don't think there's a tight end that you can really feel good about trusting here either.
Yeah, and we saw both running backs in Miami kind of take part in this game, both of them with touchdowns. Both of them looked pretty decent in this offense. Obviously, like you said, Atlanta was missing Penix and London with Cousins coming in. Now, looking at tonight's game, the pretty high over-under, when you're looking at Vegas, 51.5 is the over-under. So they're expecting high scoring, both coming off of a short week, obviously, with the Thursday night game. How are you feeling about it? How are you approaching it with your lineups?
Yeah, these are two really bad defenses. So I'm in on the score fest. I mean, a lot of times we see those Thursday night games that don't really live up to what we're hoping for. We've seen a lot of better games this year, and I think this continues the trend. I don't think either defense is really particularly good. So as long as the offenses don't completely misfire, I think we're looking at a good number of points here. And so any player that you normally would start, I would definitely start them. I'm not gonna. Both of these offenses, there's not very many marginal players. I guess Mark Andrews you would call kind of a marginal tight end at this point, and I wouldn't be hesitant to fire him up at all. I think he's got a decent chance for a good game. Likely has struggled to do much since he came back. He's got at least a chance if you're really desperate at tight end. If you're desperate at wide receiver, you could throw in Bateman, but it'd be more on the Baltimore side that'd be throwing in those secondary players rather than on the Miami side.
Yeah, Harry Snowman points out Lamar kills the Dolphins. So at @Horms_, Lamar Jackson has a passer rating of 142.7 over 4 games against the Miami Dolphins. In 2 of those games, he threw 5 touchdowns and achieved a perfect passer rating of 158. Jackson has 1,400 total yards, 15 touchdowns, and just 1 interceptions in these matchups, which is just crazy. That's some crazy stats against one team. Yeah, what do you think about it, like a Malik Washington? You talked about kind of those lesser guys in Baltimore. We see Malik kind of coming in, and I think a lot of us were seeing that there may be an opportunity there with Hill gone. He's coming off of 436 and a touchdown. Do you see him producing or being a flex option tonight?
Yeah, I mean, Malik Washington basically since Tyreek Hill has gone down has gotten you about 8 points in PPR every week, except for, of course, last week where he scores a touchdown, and then he gets you 8 + 6, or 14 points. So, that's kind of the deal with him. I think is he's going to get around that 7 to 10 point range unless he scores that touchdown. And do you feel lucky on him scoring a touchdown? I think it probably happens once every 5 games or so.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I know obviously you got to play your studs in this game, and you talked about kind of those lesser guys. Dolphins have been the best team this season versus the receivers in fantasy points allowed per game, and top 10 versus the tight end. Obviously versus the running back, they're kind of more in the bottom 10. But just a little side note with regards to their defense versus the passing game. Then we'll go to Green Bay. Always an interesting offense, just with all the pieces and more like the uncertainty. We had hopes for the rookie in Golden, and Dubs was kind of flashing there for a bit. But now the waters get even murkier because you've got Christian Watson coming off of injury. I know Jaden Reed has been one of my favorite pickups the last couple weeks off of waivers, just trying to get ahead of it and adding him as a kind of a stash on my bench. How should we approach this offense rest of season? They've been rolling. Obviously, we talked about the backfield, but looking at the passing game, who any buys, holds, sells, like any way to approach this, whether it's dynasty or when you're setting your lineups?
Yeah, I think obviously Tucker Kraft is the straw that stirs the drink in the passing game here, and the wide receivers, it's a lot more crowded. But I do think that Watson, as long as he's healthy, is going to be, at least a startable piece as a flex, especially in this environment with a lot of We have bye weeks going on, a lot of injuries, everything else. I feel a lot more confident in Watson than I do with like Matthew Golden. I think when we get Reed back, then he'll probably work in as well. But for right now, the piece that interests me the most is Christian Watson.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because you guys are mentioning in the chat and Dan as well how this does hurt Golden. The problem is that Golden didn't really capitalize. Like, I don't know if it was just the schemes or the way the offense rolled or the game script. But as a guy who has him in Dynasty and someone that I drafted in rookie drafts, he's, especially like those triflex leagues where you're looking at receivers with upside, he just hasn't necessarily. We've seen flashes, but he hasn't necessarily taken, the bull by the horn, I guess you could say. For me, I mean, when it comes to Green Bay, Tucker Kraft was always the answer. He's always been the answer. The tight end one right now, 33 fantasy points last week. And I mean, he just continues to crush. Doesn't matter who's that receiver. Now, Golden, what I would say is because the waters are getting murkier, if you're competing in Dynasty and you do have Golden on your team, I think he still has that luster. He still has that appeal as an upside play, at the receiving position. So I might shop him around to see if I can get something that can help me this year, and maybe, take advantage of the value he still holds in the Dynasty streets. I don't know if you agree with that, Dan, or not.
Yeah, I think, because he's going to be facing a lot of headwinds even next year. Every time he actually gets thrown the ball, he looks good. It doesn't seem like it's him. It just kind of seems like they don't seem very interested in, featuring him for whatever reason. And I don't know why that is. I think they'd be a better team if they featured him more in the pass game. But, maybe it's just the comfort that Love has with Dubs. It's hard to say, but it's really weird. You would think if they're going to put that kind of investment into a wide receiver, something they haven't done for, basically half of my lifetime, which is a long time, boys and girls. So, so as I pointed out a couple days ago on the Fantasy Empire, with Golden, there is no shower narrative. So.
Dan, you gotta wait till I'm ready for the. There we go. All right, from one aerial game to the other, let's go to the Bengals. I mean, they've been rolling with Flacco there. They made a little trade and brought in Flacco. He was looking good, but unfortunately, he's got a shoulder sprain. He's about, last I checked, anyways, he's about 50-50 to play against Chicago. It doesn't look good, anyways. Which means Browning should get the start now. For me, what I noticed was the running game was what kind of opened up when Flacco got behind the line of scrimmage. We saw Chase Brown and even P. Ryan last game. It seemed like it opened it up for the running game anyways. How do you see this offense moving forward? Like, let's say Browning plays this week. How confident are you, not only in the quarterback, but the pieces around him? I've got, just before I let you answer that, so this season, Flacco versus Browning, completions are about the same. So 81 for 126 is Flacco, 80 for 124 is Browning. They've got about the same passing yards, so 784 for Flacco, 757 for Browning. Touchdowns, 7 for Flacco, 6 for Browning. The big difference, Dan, 0 interceptions for Flacco and 8 for Browning. And that's where I think, that offense doesn't necessarily get as much opportunity on the field when those interceptions are being thrown. So how do you approach this offense?
Yeah, I think, with Browning, the issue is the interceptions. Like you said, I think he's going to continue to try to get the ball to Chase. But the problem is the whole team doesn't move as well. So you get fewer opportunities for, the lesser players, the Higgins, Fant, even Chase Brown. It was clear that as soon as Flacco came in, this offense took big steps forward. And I'm afraid it's probably going to take a step back, though. This particular week with Chicago, that's a beatable defense, so maybe they come out okay. But I am really, really hoping that Flacco ends up playing somehow.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is they've got a bye after the Chicago game. Looking at the splits, my concern is more with T. Higgins than Jamar Chase. If you look at like their PPR fantasy points per game using the RotoViz game splits, so T. Higgins, while Browning is in, he's getting about 8.6 average points per week, whereas he's up about 4 points up to 12 when Browning is not in as the starter, where Jamar Chase goes from 20.9 to like 22, so there's a bit of a difference. But I mean, we saw Flacco just pepper Jamar with those targets, but he seems to give the bigger boost to T. Higgins. So we'll see. Gesicki's out, so Gesicki's still out, right? From what I'll check on that, or someone in the chat knows. I'm pretty sure he's still out because he was going on IR. But I mean, who knows what that means for Fant, because we haven't seen Fant be kind of the main tight end there with Browning. But you hope that this offense can keep rolling. Maybe Browning with some time on the bench behind Flacco, some words of wisdom from the old man, maybe comes in and shows an improved performance against Chicago. But we'll see how it goes this weekend. I know that game does have a high over under, so Vegas is expecting this to be a high scoring game for sure.
Yep, definitely.
All right, so we go to Texas, Dan. Another kind of a surprise. We knew that Collins was out this week. Kirk was out. So I was curious to see how the rookies would react if they did get that playing time. You know that I've got kind of a secret crush on Hutchinson. He's been a guy I've been telling Fantasyland to add just as a stash on your bench if you're in a jam and you need to throw in a receiver in the flex or in your wide receiver 3 spot. And we saw all three this week, Dan, kind of shine against San Francisco at home. This offense looked a lot better. And I don't know, like, what are your thoughts now? Because now we have reports that not only Collins is back at practice, but so is Kirk. So how are you approaching this passing game? What are you doing with the rookies? What are you doing with, kind of any of these receivers? And you can throw Schultz in there as well.
Yeah, I think the Texans are going to be, and if you're relying on the Texans, be prepared for just to continue the shower narrative, a very cold shower against Denver this week. I think this is potentially the lowest scoring game of the week. The Denver offense is elite. The Texans offense is elite. I don't see a whole lot going on here scoring wise. So, San Francisco is low-key a bad defense right now. So it wasn't too much of a surprise to me that, the Texans were able to move the ball and score pretty well on them. When they lost Bosa, their defense just got a lot worse. And then, of course, lost Fred Warner as well. So, that defense for San Francisco is hurting. So don't take what the Texans did last week and try to say, well, it's going to be like this moving forward. I think it's going to be, not as good as it was last week, not as bad as it's going to be this week, but somewhere in between. And as far as those specific players, I mean, I think Collins is obviously the one player that you can trust. Schultz is going to be, kind of a low tight end 1, a high tight end 2 type of player. I mean, he's going to be the guy who can get you about 10 points a week, something like that. You're never going to be thrilled with it, but you're never going to be too disappointed either. And, Higgins, Knoll, and Hutchinson, honestly, I think the sooner they get Hutchinson out of there and let Higgins and Knoll run with the job, and then also Kirk out of there, the better off this offense is going to be. I think those are more talented players at this stage in their career, but, they seem very slow to embrace those rookies. So I expect more of the same, where it's just not, you can't really start Knoll, you can't really start Hutchinson, you can't really start Higgins, you probably can't even really start Kirk, because they're not giving anybody a full run at the job yet.
Yeah, the Hutchinson thing is weird. Like, I joke about it, but it's weird just because it brought in these two rookies. They spent pretty good draft capital on him, but he still seems to be, I mean, I don't know if he's doing something great in practice, or Stroud just has some, secret rapport that he likes to have him on the field, or what it is, but seems to be that no matter what the receiving situation is or the roster situation is, they somehow at least give him 3 targets in that offense per week, if not more. This week we saw him obviously with 5 for 69 and a touchdown. So we'll see how this evolves moving forward. For me, at the running back position, I mean, Woody Marks is definitely my preferred Texan running back moving forward. Even with less carries this week, 6 less carries than Chubb, he put up almost 10 more yards and was more involved in the passing game. 4 for 49. This past week. And then Snowman mentions or points out that Patrick Surtain is out for 4 weeks now. So maybe that helps the Texans offense a little bit this week as they face off against Denver. Vegas expecting this to be a low one with the over-under at 39.5.
Yeah, and it's a good call on Marks too. He's kind of consolidated a lot of the high-value touches in this offense, which is what we like to see. But Nick Chubb, still getting a lot of touches, still getting most of the early down rushing, So until Marks is able to capture a little bit more of that, Marks is going to be kind of more of a flex play than somebody you really feel super confident starting every week.
Yeah, he's kind of like the Kareem Hunt role in Houston, that we're seeing. I mean, maybe that role expands this week with Pacheco out, but we'll talk about that a bit later in the show. Guys, don't forget to smash the like. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. I see the questions. Dan, maybe we get a couple questions in from the chat. Keep them coming. We'll be answering them throughout the show. We'll do this one from Jonathan Santiago. PPR this week. We've got Sutton at Houston, and then we've got Tracy, where did we say, are at home to San Fran. Who do you like, Dan?
I'm probably going to take Tracy there just because the San Francisco offense, as noted, is not great. Tracy should have a healthy share of what's going on in the backfield. Sutton has been a little bit more tough to trust this year. It's kind of been, moving back and forth between him and the running backs, and Ingram's been getting a bit. We've had Troy Franklin popping in there and getting some good target share. I think Sutton is still a fine player, but he's just a little bit less trustable because they're starting to spread things around a little bit more.
Last 5 weeks, Dan, the Texans have been the best team against the receiving positions when you're looking at fantasy points allowed per game. So I'm with you. I would throw Tracy in, especially with the Skattebo situation, gives him a decent start there. With we touched a bit on the backfield in KC. Why don't we get to that situation? Pacheco is week to week. We talked about Kareem Hunt. I mean, he's like the I don't even know what to call it. He just won't go away. Like whether you're a Pacheco fan or you're a Brashard Smith fan, like Hunt is just there. He's there just to annoy you. But now, I guess the question is, Dan, with Pacheco out, do we see Hunt kind of take over more on the passing side of things, more of that Pacheco role, or does Brashard Smith, who we've seen flashes from now, come in and start getting more exposure, more opportunities from this Andy Reid offense?
I think, especially this particular week, it's probably going to be a lot more Kareem Hunt because Buffalo is really not very good against the run. And I think Hunt is going to be the one who's able to do the damage on the ground. Brashard Smith, I think, as a rusher, is still not he's still developmental. We'll call him that. I think as a receiver, he's really good, and I think they will use him out of the backfield a little bit more in that capacity. But I think that it's probably going to be, like 70% of the rushing attempts going to Kareem Hunt. And, I guess it wouldn't even surprise me if they made Eli Mitchell active for this week, and he snuck in there for a few rushing attempts as well, just to kind of give Hunt a little bit of a breather and not overburden Brashard Smith with things that they're not comfortable with him doing against this is a big game against Buffalo. So I think Hunt is probably going to be the player that I feel most comfortable playing in this backfield.
Yeah, the Bills fifth, giving up the fifth most points to the running back position in fantasy points per game in the last 5 weeks anyways. And I mean, the way I look at it is if you've been dependent, or if you are dependent on Pacheco, your team's probably not great. He's given you a couple double-digit games with 12 points. Otherwise, it's all been in the single digits. You talked about Hunt's usage, and yeah, I mean, Brashard Smith, 3 to 5 targets from week 4 to 7, including 81 yards and 13 fantasy points against Vegas. So last week was a bit off. Obviously, Pacheco and Hunt both healthy, but I could see Andy Reid kind of leaning a bit more. Maybe, wow, Patrick Mahomes. Wow, that's a big name to go blank on. Could see him maybe leaning on a bit more those check downs and kind of that, receiving game out of the backfield. He's kind of a nice PPR flex, I think. I don't necessarily want to put him in unless I'm desperate or, have bye week situations, but it would be nice to see Brashard Smith kind of take advantage of this situation here and become a little more prominent in that Chiefs offense. Yep. Let's go. Let's talk about this week, Dan. You know what? Let's go by position, and we'll each give like a kind of a sneaky fringe type of play that we like at each positions coming into the week. So I'll let you go. The fear that you'll snipe me, I will let you go first at the quarterback position.
Well, if you want to go first, you can, because I have 2 for each position. So if you take,
look at you prepared.
If you
Comes
take
in
one,
prepared. Well, why don't you know what? I'll give mine first. It's not the best play, but I feel like if there's hope for this guy, this might be the week. Let me just see here. Who are they playing? Oh, so Vegas at home to Jacksonville. I know Geno Smith, huge disappointment, this offense as a whole. He's coming off of a bye. He's at home. And Jacksonville giving up, well, basically the worst team versus the position, the quarterback position. So he gets, and a little cherry caveat. I don't know how much it plays a factor this week, but you got to think they brought in Tyler Lockett for a reason. So maybe that helps them, but maybe a bit of light at the end of the tunnel for Geno Smith this week if you're desperate. Whether you had Flacco coming in to replace your Burrow or you're really desperate at the position, I could see Geno Smith being a decent stream this week. In a 44.5 line is what Vegas is giving them, and the Raiders being a dog by 3 points. So, maybe a little sneaky play here with Geno Smith.
Yeah, he's with Brock Bowers coming back and
Bowers back, yeah.
Yeah, and Tyler Lockett, and then hopefully Jacoby Myers. He's got a little bit more to work with. Hope you're probably not starting him unless you're talking about a super flex. But even in super flex, I have a couple teams that have Geno Smith, and I've been very reluctant to start him. So I'm going to hesitantly put him in my lineup, I think, this week. So and I'll throw out somebody probably a little bit less far down the list, but Aaron Rodgers, didn't have the world's greatest game against Green Bay. I think he'll bounce back against Indianapolis. That's a pass funnel defense. So I think we're going to see a pretty good passing performance out of him. And, you can also, we talked about it earlier, but Tua against the Ravens, I think, is also a pretty good one.
I'm going to piggyback off your Rodgers play. My receiver that I like this week, Emanuel Wilson, coming off of his best game versus Green Bay, 4 for 74 and a touchdown. Indy, the second worst against the wide receiver position in fantasy points per game allowed. And Rodgers, just hearing clips here and there, seems to like him, seems to like what he does in practice, and maybe that's why we're starting to see him emerge a bit more in this offense. But I think he can be a decent flex play this week for sure in that Steelers offense.
Yeah, definitely. Wide receiver. I'm going to that same Indy Pittsburgh game. But I'm going to go with Alec Pierce. Looks like Downs might be out again. And if he is, I think Pierce is probably the one who's going to pick up a little bit of the slack. And the Steelers are very much a pass funnel defense as well. So I think that Pierce is going to continue. Last week he was borderline startable, even with Downs in. The week before that, he did really nice for you. So he's somebody I'm going to put a little bit of trust into again. And, and for those people with Jamison Williams, I know we shouldn't even be talking about him in this segment because he should be doing so much better. But for a guy you drafted probably in like the 5th round who has performed like a 14th rounder or something like that, I think this might be the week where JMO gets untracked. I think, after a bye week, they look at some ways to tweak this offense and try to get JMO a little bit more involved. So, and the Minnesota defense certainly has been very hit and miss of late. So I like JMO's chances this week.
Yeah, that's another. I was just pulling up the Minnesota Detroit game. That's another high over under at 48.5. So they're definitely expecting. I mean, the Lions 8.5 favorites. So you got to think we see a couple long bombs to JMO this week. I'm going to go to the running back position, Dan. One piece that we picked up hot off the waiver wire in the last few weeks is Bam Knight. And he goes up against Dallas on Monday Night Football, who's basically the worst versus the running back position in fantasy points allowed. So I'll go there with kind of my fringe deeper, maybe flex, maybe RB2, depending on your bye week situation, play for week 9.
Yeah, I'm firing up Bam Knight with confidence any place where I need him. So I think that's a great pick. I think Zach Charbonnet is also a really good pick. Washington has struggled a little bit against running backs. They've been giving up a fair amount of running back points. Charbonnet is definitely their goal line back. And they also use him, to at least spell Walker at other times. And Charbonnet has actually outpointed Walker in fantasy over half the games this season, I think. So I like being able to use him and feel pretty confident with it. It's just kind of a weird situation where you're feeling more confident using the backup running back Charbonnet than you feel using the starter in Walker.
Which is super frustrating if you have both like I do on one team. I mean,
yeah.
The good thing with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've got the same deal. Both players on one team, and it's like, okay, between the two, I think I'm just going to start Charbonnet.
Which is why, Dan, I don't usually like doing that, even in Dynasty, is handcuffing or grabbing two guys from the offense. I guess the approach with that offense specifically was you thought you would at least get one of them surpass the other one as the clear guy, or injuries would kind of help you. But it didn't. The good news is when I got Walker, I also got Tucker Kraft in that deal, and I'm loving that right now on that team for sure. But speaking of tight ends, Dan, I know Cole Kmet comes back. He's at practice this week, but Colson Loveland could continue to see an increase in targets, snap share. He's going up against the worst team versus the tight end position in Cincinnati. He's got 3 red zone targets in his last 3 games. So I don't mind Loveland this week. I think they're going to keep kind of slowly increasing his usage in this offense. I know Kmet there, he's kind of like the Kareem Hunt that we talked about. He's kind of pesty and annoying if you've got Loveland, but I feel like this offense wants to get Loveland to be more a part of this offense, and no better week to do it than against the Bengals' awful tight end defense this week.
Yeah, the Bengals have by a long shot the worst defense against tight ends. Basically every tight end that they face scores a touchdown against them. So love that one. I'm going to go to Jonnu Smith in Pittsburgh, especially if Freiermuth doesn't play, and Freiermuth is looking a little bit iffy. Again, we're taking advantage of the Colts tight end defense, which is, and they are a pass funnel in general, and also just not very good against the tight end. So if Jonnu is able to consolidate a little bit more of the work because Freiermuth is out, I think he's going to be a pretty startable player this week.
All right, let's go to another question here for Parker vibes, and maybe we can figure it out just by the trade, but try to specify if it's dynasty or redraft, just for, when you're hosting a show, you're trying to, it's like hard to kind of get your brain to wrap around it. But trade Kittle for Monty, Barner, and Theo Johnson. If I don't, I would be starting Kyle Monangai. So basically, he's trying to add a running back. I'm guessing this would probably be redraft, right, Dan?
I would think it's probably redraft, but
Yeah,
whether
I
it's
think so.
redraft or dynasty, my answer is going to be the same.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm trading off Kittle for that.
Agreed.
You know, and Harry Snowman in the chat says never make a trade just to make a start. There's always something available in the dumpster.
100%.
I'm not sure 2 nickels makes a dime. Yeah, totally agree. That's absolutely the right way to approach it. Don't let a 1 week problem cause a problem the rest of the year for you, and I think that's what would happen. You'd be kicking yourself if you let Kittle go.
Well, especially if the piece you got to let go of is a top guy at his position. That's a big loss to try to make up, down the road or even with a trade like that. So I agree. I mean, you're better off even just throwing Monangai and hoping that he gets more usage, this week, which, I mean, he has been getting, right? He's been more and more involved in that offense. So there is a possibility he gets you a nice little touchdown at the goal line or something like that. I think you're better off doing that than getting rid of a piece like Kittle, unless you're really getting like a nice pivot or something like that. But I wouldn't necessarily do it for like the guys said here with regards to filling in a weekly start.
Right.
He's saying it's a 2-player keeper league. I already have Jamar Chase as my first keeper.
Oh, I think that's a different guy. I think that's the Walker London.
Oh, okay. You know what? I'll throw that on right now. Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at it and I'm like, the emoji's different, but for some reason, okay. So let's go to Frozen Gaming. Got offered Walker, London, and Amon-Ra for Kyron, Rice, and Diggs. Half PPR. Should I take it? Again, I'm guessing this is redraft.
So he says 2-player keeper league, already have Jamar Chase as a first keeper. So
that's right.
He can keep one more of these guys. For me, I think this is kind of dependent on where you're sitting at running back and wide receiver, because you can say Amon-Ra and Rice are pretty, lateral moves. I think in a lot of ways, I think Rice plays that Amon role for the Chiefs a lot. Kyron Williams right now definitely better than Walker. So given that you're probably not keeping either one of these players next year, Kyron is definitely going to be better for you this year. But then of course the third part of the trade, then you've got London versus Diggs. I would probably rather have London, but it could be close. I think Diggs is coming on. He's going to be a useful piece. So I'm probably going to stick with Kyron, Rice, and Diggs. If it's if we're just talking about a 2-player keeper and you can hang on to Rice, I feel real good hanging on to Rice. And I think you're probably better off this year with Kyron and Diggs than you are with Walker and London.
Yeah, agreed. We just talked about the challenges of having Walker on your team this year. So right. I like that breakdown, Dan. Keep the questions coming, guys. Appreciate you guys sending those in the chat. Dan, let's talk trades. Not fantasy trades. I mean, we'll we could talk about how it affects our fantasy teams, but let's talk NFL trades. The trade deadline this coming Tuesday. And, the thing is, with this time of year, you hear so many rumors, so many names that might get traded. And a lot of those names won't. Some names that we don't even know about yet that are maybe available will get traded. And the fun thing is it kind of throws a wrench in whether it's your fantasy teams or some trades, or it gets the action going with regards to fantasy trades and dynasty, especially in redraft. So let's talk about some names right now that we are hearing. Let's start with Breece Hall right now, probably the biggest name when you're looking at the running back position. Do you have like a favorite landing spot for him?
I mean, I think Breece Hall, I would love to see him go to Washington. I think he'd be a fantastic player there. He could also look good in Houston. If they're willing to do that. I don't know if that's the way that they're going, but both of those places I think would be fantastic. I will absolutely be tearing my hair out, throwing things at the wall, smashing my TV if Breece Hall goes to the Los Angeles Chargers, because that's just not going to be good for anybody.
It's funny. I thought we'd have similar names, but a couple more teams that I thought would be interesting. One is Jacksonville. I mean, I don't know that, Etienne hasn't hit double digits in about 4 weeks now. And I don't know that I've seen enough from Tootin. So if this team does have any hope of turning this around, I mean, that's one place they could start it. The other place that I thought might be interesting is New England. We talked about it earlier, and they lose Rhamondre. Maybe they don't necessarily trust Hendo yet, or maybe they could make him a complementary piece to Breece Hall. But I think the way that offense is rolling, how good they look going into the second half of the season, Breece Hall would be a nice addition to that offense. Jacoby Myers, Dan, he's been in the past, I want to say few years. Sorry?
Before we go to Jacoby, I like your idea of sending Breece to New England. I think it's unlikely just because they're both in the same, they're both in the AFC East.
Yes.
But on the other hand, why not make it really great for fantasy and make it Breece Hall for Travion Henderson? Get Henderson out of there.
There you go. There you go. Now you're thinking, Dan. I like that.
Yeah. Let's make this a win-win, and most importantly, let's make it a win for me. That's what we're focused on here.
My fantasy teams matter most, Dan. That's all that matters at the end of the day.
That's exactly it.
We talked a bit of the Vegas offense. They've that team can probably hang it up. You talked about the Commanders, and I guess my question is, do you think the Commanders still think they're competing this year in that division? I think the answer is probably yes, but it's definitely been tougher than they probably expected with the additions of Debo and the way that the offseason went for them and last season. But Vegas having a piece like Jacoby Myers, you got to think they're shopping him around. He did kind of mention something about wanting to get moved coming into the season. I have the Bucs as a possible, just with all the injuries that they've dealt with. Who are some offenses that you'd like to see Myers go to?
Yeah, I think the Bucs makes a lot of sense. I think Pittsburgh, there's been a lot of steam about Myers to Pittsburgh, and I think that definitely makes some sense as well, because where they really need the help is somebody who can, basically be a great slot receiver for them. So I think if they can get the compensation right, that might make some sense.
What about Njoku, the tight end we see Fannin kind of breaking out in Cleveland. They've got some nice young pieces there. Njoku getting a little long in the tooth, I mean, for tight ends, not really, but just, he's been there for his career now. What are some spots that you see the very effective tight end when he's on go maybe before the trade deadline?
Yeah, this is another place where I think he might look good in Washington. He can be a commie. I think he'd also look good with Tampa Bay right now. I think he would fit in there really well. Because, I mean, you can use Cade Otton as a little bit more of the traditional, blocking tight end, and you can use Njoku a little bit more as a slot receiver. So I think he could fit in there really well and not really hurt Otton too much. And I think he would probably make that whole passing game a lot better.
Yeah, I said Tampa Bay, and I threw the Rams in there. I know they've got Terrence Ferguson, but and Higbee, but maybe just to upgrade. Now they've got Puka Nacua coming back. They upgraded that wide, from not upgraded, but they lost Kupp and brought in Adams. I just think that would kind of elevate that offense nicely for Stafford as they go into the second half for another playoff run.
Yep.
This next guy, Dan, I just wrote nowhere. Just hang it up, buddy. It's time to hang it up. It's Calvin Ridley. I know, very polarizing player. Even I remember when he was in Atlanta, you had guys saying like, this guy's for sure a wide receiver one. And then you've got, people I think at this point maybe lost hope, but in Tennessee, it's looking a little rough. With him and Cam Ward, he's been injured a lot. So do you think there's anywhere that he might get traded to before the deadline?
Yeah, I think the Titans owe it to themselves to try to get something out of Ridley. He's injured, so I don't think they're going to get much. I think even if he asked for his release, I'd probably give it to him if I was the Titans, because they really need to focus on the future, and Ridley is not that for them. Where I'd like to see him go is really any place with a strong alpha wide receiver, that could use, kind of a second banana a little bit, and that might be. I don't know. I haven't thought too much because like you, I'm kind of like, maybe you should just hang it up, buddy. But I don't know. I mean, he might. Here's a weird suggestion. What about Atlanta? With Drake London. He might as well come full circle there.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, because Darnell Mooney has had troubles of his own. So, he Yeah, that's probably my best suggestion there is Atlanta. I'm not sure how many other places could use him. Maybe Carolina, maybe Buffalo, but he's got to get healthy.
Another receiver that's been getting a lot of attention in the trade streets is Rashid Shaheed out there in New Orleans. I think a lot of pieces in New Orleans are probably getting attention this time of year as they probably rebuild after this season with a new regime coming in. Where do you think the young receiver could end up before Tuesday?
Yeah, I'm going to go with my fellow podcast host on the Fantasy Empire, Matt Modica, who's a big Bills fan, and Nick Costantino, who was in the chat earlier for this show. Also, he's part of the Go Bills FFPC management group. So those guys both are pounding the table to get Shaheed into Buffalo, and I think that would be an outstanding fit. So I like that one a lot.
AJ Reber is asking a question. I told him just to go back and look at the full breakdown. We talked about the Kansas City backfield, moving forward this weekend. Just if you want to get the kind of full breakdown there. He's saying he just tuned in. We appreciate you tuning in, man.
Yeah, for this week, Hunt.
Yeah.
That's the way I'd go.
Nick says he couldn't agree more. Where receivers go to die, Dan, in Buffalo. Let's face it. Unfortunately, which is crazy because it's like, you think like, Allen's finally going to get his guy. This offense is already rolling. They've got James Cook, who's just crushing this year. They've got Kincaid, who's finally got it going. And, it'd be nice to see one guy there, but it's kind of like that Colts team that we talked about. Like they like to spread the ball around, and maybe Shaheed can give an upgrade in at a specific in a specific role. Snowman saying Buffalo is in Cleveland. True that. So a couple more guys we have. I mean, we've got Kirk Cousins on here. I put Carolina just because Dalton's done, but I don't know that Cousins still has it after what we saw this week, Dan.
Yeah, I think Carolina would be an interesting spot for a backup, but that's not really what he wants, and I don't think I don't know that that's the kind of trade that they would make, because I don't think that they would get enough for Cousins as a backup. They need him to go someplace where he would at least be considered for a starter. So, and I think really the only place that fits is my Minnesota Vikings. I think if J.J. McCarthy goes in there and just absolutely stinks it up against the Lions, you could see the Vikings make a panic move before the trade deadline next Tuesday. And just say, we're going to bring in Cousins, and we don't know who is going to be our quarterback, but Cousins certainly couldn't hurt. And the season is going to be circling the drain if J.J. McCarthy does not look good this next week. So that's my thought. I don't love it, but I think it's possible.
I was going to ask you about that situation, just because do you think this is one of these situations where, like, it's that buy low opportunity on J.J. McCarthy, or do you think that there's really a lot of doubt with the young quarterback? Do you think there's turmoil in Minnesota? I saw something about who's the HC there, Dan?
Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, so Connell, that even like he wasn't like his usual self coming into the season, not very positive. Like, do you think is all that you're in Minnesota? Is all that stuff kind of? You think that's truth, or do you think it's just people, throwing headlines out there for clickbait? Like, what are your thoughts on the situation overall? And do you think JJ McCarthy could be a buy right now in like a super flex league or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think. First off, I think Kevin O'Connell was actually pretty positive about McCarthy all offseason leading up into the season. I kept hearing nothing but good things. I bought in heavily on McCarthy as a second quarterback in a lot of my redraft leagues. I was looking to acquire him for cheap in Dynasty and put him on a few teams. And, so far it's been an abject disaster. There's no doubt about it. He's had basically exactly one good quarter of play, but the offensive line has been a lot of the problem. But I think Kevin O'Connell really took a hard reset when he came out of that game. I don't think that the sprained ankle was fake or anything like that. I think it was a real thing. I think the length of time that they've kept him out. That might be a little bit more of, people talk soft benching or whatever. I don't know that it's a soft benching, but it was a benching that happened because of the ankle. They had to put him on the shelf because of injury, and they're just being very careful about how they bring him back. They wanted to, they saw what he did in live action, so now they know what they need to work on. So O'Connell spent that time working with him. So he's one of those players that, if I'm on a rebuild or something like that, I'm probably going to take the chance on JJ McCarthy because he's the type of player that you can acquire him for a price that's probably fairly reasonable. And if he hits, you have a huge increase in value. And if he misses, you haven't lost that much. I mean, it's not setting you back really. So, give me cautiously some more JJ McCarthy. I don't think he's dead yet.
All right. Hopefully you can you hear me still, Dan?
Yeah.
All right. Cause you could tell by my picture there, my laptop just froze. So I'm going to try to get to the end of this. We got one more player just to speak quickly, trade deadline wise, Jerome Ford. Obviously we see Quinshawn kind of taking over that backfield. They still have, who's the other rookie? My whole screen is completely frozen. Everything's frozen, so I can't really.
You are still showing up as moving around and everything.
Okay. See, on my end, everything's frozen. You're frozen. I'm frozen. So okay, that's cool.
Yep.
Who's so apologies to the chat because I won't be able to do anything anywhere right now. I'm like completely frozen. So Dan's gonna.
I got one question from Nick. He's saying what to trade right now in a super flex for JJ McCarthy. Late first, I would say, I would. You could do a late first. I would almost be looking to say, can I get it done for a second and another player or something like that? Couple seconds, I think would be a good idea. Late first is kind of not the way that I would really want to approach it. I would rather approach it, a couple pieces and see if I can figure out something like that.
The last guy we had on here, Dan, was Jerome Ford. With regards to landing spots, I had Dallas as a possible just to add depth behind Javonte, who's having a great season. What are your thoughts with the running back?
I like that. I think that's a good one. This is a running back I wouldn't be disappointed to see end up in on the Chargers because I don't think he would really wreck anybody's value. He might wreck Vidal's value a little bit as he came back, but I think it's going to be Hampton with Vidal as the two. And if they add a player like Jerome Ford, he's going to be more insurance than anything. So I don't know that I see Jerome Ford going any place where he's going to really become a startable piece. He's just going to be, insurance for some team.
Let's look at, before we close this out, Dan, and if there's any other questions, we can answer them after this part here. But just looking at kind of matchups that we like going into this week, some of the more high-scoring games. There's 5 right now that have like pretty good over-unders when you're looking at Vegas. I mean, the KC Buffalo game is just going to be a fun game overall, but should be pretty good shootout. Which one of these do you think will be extra special?
Yeah, I like. I think the Pittsburgh Indianapolis game is probably going to be a pretty good one. I think the Chiefs and the Bills. I know we're all hoping that's going to be a shootout, and I think it's probably going to get pulled in that direction because I don't think Buffalo is really going to be able to stop Kansas City, and I think Kansas City's defense is going to have plenty of problems with Buffalo if Josh Allen just goes full beast mode on him, which I expect is probably going to happen. So I think that could be a great game as well.
Yeah, the other games that are showing, that Vegas likes high scoring is obviously tonight. We talked about earlier, Baltimore, Miami, Monday night, Arizona, Dallas, and then Chicago, Cincinnati was the other one this weekend. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we've got about 4 games that are, 40 or less, or in that range with the over-unders. I think the one that will probably be, Denver's missing Surtain, so maybe that plays a factor. Chargers at Tennessee could be pretty low scoring. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, that could be. I think the Patriots and Atlanta, both defenses can be pretty good at times. So I could see that one going under. But I think Carolina, Green Bay, Carolina's defense is not terrible this year. Green Bay's defense is excellent. If Green Bay, doesn't have it together offensively, that could be a low-scoring game as well.
Saints, Rams, and Jaguars, Raiders were the other two that I noticed the over/under was on the lower end of things. Any other questions, Dan, in the chat that before we close this out that we can answer?
No, I think we got them all.
All right. Awesome. You guys have been awesome as usual in the chat. Appreciate all of you for joining. That like button, second of your time, really helps us out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Tap that little notification so you don't miss any of our shows. We do at least bring you the playbook on a weekly basis, and going to try to add to that as we go deeper into the season and give you guys some more content to help you out. If you are interested in joining the GOAT District team, make sure you reach out at GOAT District on the X Machine or even in the comments here on YouTube. Dan, what do you have coming up? Obviously, you and your crew with the Empire put out, top end content every week, every Tuesday, 11 p.m. Anything else people should look out for?
Yeah, Bradley and I last night recorded a mid-season Stack Hunters, just a little, we got together, talked how the season's going and what we're seeing, moving forward. So you can look for that. And then, nice. Of course, so Tuesday, and then, next Tuesday it'll be Empire, and then you and I think I'm going to be out on Thursday, so we'll have to do it sometime before that. But we're going to find a way to get the GOAT District in before I head up to northern Minnesota for a little deer hunting, and then we'll move on from there.
Yeah, for sure. We'll get something out for you guys next week prior to Thursday. Past that, we're going to try to keep it on the Thursdays, but we move it around a little bit just to try to give you guys the best content, and sometimes our schedules don't line up. So make sure you're following at GOAT District on the X Machine. I always put out, whenever shows are coming, who we have coming on, all that kind of stuff. And make sure you follow Dan at Overhyped Sleeper, no E on the end. I'm not sure how this show is going to end because, like I said, my whole laptop is frozen right now. So you know what, guys? Enjoy Thursday Night Football. Go Jays. We got one more. Hopefully tomorrow night we can close it out. And hopefully you and your kids are all safe tomorrow night trick-or-treating. And enjoy the games this weekend, guys. Good luck week 9. We'll check you all later.